Welcome to another edition of Forensic Focus. I am your host, Charles Amodio with FAZ Forensics. At FAZ Forensics, we specialize in business valuation and forensic accounting. When answers matter, FAZ delivers. Today, I'm here with my colleague, Abigail Donohue. Abigail, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I can't complain. It's a beautiful day outside.
It is, for once.
Absolutely. Do you have any plans this week for the 4th or?
I do. I'm having some friends over for a little barbecue pool party situation on Friday. So I've done that for the past couple of years because my parents are usually on vacation the first week of July. So just me and my brother at home with the dogs. So having some friends over, just have a little barbecue, hang out by the pool, and just relax. So I'm looking forward to it.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're gonna have a good time.
And the weather's supposed to be, well, right now at least it's going to cooperate on Friday, which I think I'm pretty happy about. So,
Yeah, I think we lucked out for sure. I feel like this is the first week that it's actually not raining every day. So
or like unbearably hot too,
that too, yeah.
right? Had
Yeah.
that heat spell last week, which was challenging, but anyway,
Yes. Yes. This week is beautiful. So happy about
yes,
that.
that's great. That's great. So, today I want to, kind of talk to you a little bit about some of the things that you work on, types of cases you work on, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about, some of the types of cases that you've been, involved with lately.
Yeah, so I work on mostly no fault insurance claims and then loss of use claims. I haven't had as many loss of use claims recently, but I think over the winter months I had quite a few trucking claims, like semi trucks, dump trucks, any type of vehicle that's used for the work that's being done. Tow trucks, any type of truck like that, I get a lot of those claims. And then as far as no fault goes, I see a little bit of everything. Lots of Uber and Lyft drivers. We've got construction workers, hairdressers, makeup artists. What else? Instacart drivers. Lots of drivers. Lots of the rideshare apps. I think I named most of them. But I think recently I've been seeing quite a lot of Uber drivers. I don't know if there's a reason for that trend, but I've seen definitely a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers recently. So really that's what I've been focusing on is truck drivers, Uber drivers, and Lyft drivers, and then other self-employed individuals as well.
So maybe you could tell me a little bit about, what's a loss of use claim? What does that mean?
So, a loss of use claim is where the individual who's making the claim, their vehicle is what they use to generate income, whether that's truck driving, delivery, such as construction materials, different types of fill or wastewater, stuff like that. So they need the vehicle in order to perform the work. Without the vehicle, they can't generate the income. So when they're involved in the accident, the vehicle itself is taken out of commission for a certain period of time. So they're claiming the lost earnings that they're unable to generate as a result of the vehicle undergoing the necessary repairs to be put back on the road.
Okay. So we're basically calculating the loss of income for that particular that particular individual or company that's making the claim.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. 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 What are some of your challenges when you work on those loss of use claims?
I feel like I've seen a lot of at least trucking companies that specialize in usually it's just transportation of different materials back and forth to construction sites or um, just the transport of any type of material or load a certain like extensive distance. A lot of them tend to not have the best record keeping. A lot of them are family owned or, they're somewhere out in the Midwest where, you know, not to say that technology hasn't hit the Midwest, but a lot of them are just smaller companies that don't have the best record keeping. A lot of the times it might just be a husband and a wife who own a business or like brothers who own a business and the records are really just not there. So I tend to struggle with asking for certain information that a lot of the times is quite literally written down on a piece of note paper and saved in a drawer that they've had in their office that's existed for 30 or so years. They don't seem to keep record of their hauls and their transactions as much as I would like them to. So sometimes it's hard for them to pull certain information without them having to go through a filing cabinet that's covered in dust, basically.
Okay. Okay. I mean, obviously, if they work for a company or they may, they get like 1099s and they, you know, likely file taxes. So we're evaluating that information.
Yeah, so if the driver is contracted by another company, usually they have better records than somebody who actually owns the company themselves. So sometimes it's easier for somebody who just picks up a load from a company here and a company there. They usually have better records than people that own the business themselves. So 1099s are something we definitely want to take a look at. And typically they'll report that on a Schedule C on their tax return. So then we'll take a look at that as well. But if they own the company themselves, it's a little bit different. So,
Okay. Okay. Great. So what's a no fault claim? Tell me about what you do in no fault.
yeah, so similar to a loss of use, again, it involves a vehicle that's been in an accident, but rather than the vehicle being the main source of income, it's the person and their ability to travel, to move around. Like the Uber drivers, they obviously need their car to drive around, but the main thing moving the vehicle is themselves. So, in that accident, the person making a claim is actually injured extensively to the point where they're unable to work. Usually, they're cleared by their doctor to be out of work for an extensive period of time. So, we help calculate the lost earnings that they were unable to generate since the person themselves is physically unable to get themselves to work.
Okay. So these are typically self-employed individuals that we're dealing with and evaluating claims for.
Yes, I believe for most insurance carriers, if they're paid W-2 wages, they can handle that in-house. But when it comes to somebody who's self-employed, it becomes a little trickier because they may report their income in multiple different places. So.
What kind of records do you typically request when you're evaluating no fault claims?
So usually we like to take a look at tax returns for the past few years, preferably 2 years prior to the date of loss. We'll look at those tax returns and if they report income as a self-employed individual, most likely they have a Schedule C reported on their 1040, which will be all of the self-employment income and any related expenses that they've incurred throughout the year. And then we'll also take a look at 1099s, whether a 1099K, a 1099 NAC, or a 1099 miscellaneous, which they're issued from companies that they're contracted by. And then it's great if they're like an Uber and a Lyft driver because they'll actually have statements within the app that they use to do their work that are able to either screenshot those statements or download those statements and send those over to us so we're able to see exactly what they're making each week. And then if they have another type of business, we also like to take a look at their bank statements to see when they're receiving deposits, if there's any trends in income that we might be able to see from those statements. And then anything else that they may be able to provide, logbooks, profit and loss statements, etc.
Okay. What are some of the challenges that you deal with on no fault claims?
Again, the record keeping is not always ideal. I think, somebody who's self-employed might not feel the need to keep track of their income as it's really just themselves and their business. Whereas, a larger corporation would probably have better records. Sometimes these individuals might not file tax returns. They might have filed an extension for their tax returns. Or sometimes we'll see individuals who recently entered the country who might not have records, obviously, from prior work history. Sometimes we also run into individuals who don't understand the tax information that we're requesting. They're not sure where they can locate it, and they're not even sure if the information that they have is an accurate reflection of what they believe that they're earning. So we run into quite a few different situations, but we're usually able to figure it out or help them through to find the documentation that we're requesting.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. And what, as far as like the type of work that you do and obviously, evaluating, claims for loss of income for individuals, what do you like about, some of the work that you do? Obviously, you've been doing it for a while and
Yeah. I think that there's always a different story with each claim that we get. We have a pretty high volume of no fault claims, and over the past year, we've seen an increase in the number of loss of use claims that we've received. And each person that you talk to obviously has a different story, but it's always something different. The way that we approach each claim is the same, but the individual that's making the claim, each of them have a different story. They might be obviously upset by the events that cause them to be out of work. They're injured, they're not able to get out, and they can be kind of frustrated with the whole process, which is understandable because, the documents we are requesting obviously aren't going to be something that they can just pull up immediately. So it does require a little bit of effort on their end to get the documents over to us. But I've found that, a lot of the individuals that we work with are very nice people, and I've been able to hear a lot of different stories, a lot of different career paths. I always use like Uber and Lyft as an example of no fault, but we've seen hairdressers, DJs, we've seen professional athletes, just a variety of people that you get to talk to, and it's interesting to see what people are doing to, you know, support themselves. So lots of different stories that I get to hear, so I find that to be interesting.
okay, great, great. And do you work on any other types of cases that you work on or you've been involved with over the last couple of years?
I've also worked on some no-fault claims that also incur substitute services, which is
Okay.
where their business can't necessarily just completely stop its operations. So they will hire somebody else to take over for them, or they'll have to pay their current employees additional pay in order to keep the business running in their absence. So we'll take a look at those as well. Sometimes they won't necessarily have a loss of earnings, but they're able to get reimbursed for the additional pay that they've put towards their substitutes in order to keep the business running. So I've worked on some of those. So those are interesting as well. It requires a little bit more investigation into their earnings, their prior payroll history, and stuff like that. So I've worked on some of those. So
Okay.
um, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I mean, it sounds like it's a way for somebody to keep their business running. And obviously they've incurred the expense, but but that's a reimbursable expense under their policy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Like for somebody who's, I think right now we're working on a claim where the individual is a tutor for a community college, and she's not able to just completely stop her operations while classes continue. So she had to pay somebody who was already working for her in her business. She had to pay them additional payroll because she had to take over her classes that she was contractually unable to completely cancel. I believe in her contract it says it's your responsibility if you're unable to attend your classes, you need to find somebody to do it for you. So it's definitely a good route to go down if you didn't necessarily incur a loss of business earnings, but you still incurred a loss of those substitute service payments.
Okay. So it sounds like, obviously a lot of these, whether it's loss of use, no fault, or the substitute services claim, I mean, obviously it's a situation where you're trying to put the insured, the claimant back in a position they would have been had it not been for the accident, right? And that's obviously the ultimate goal with the insurance. So that's good. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all the time that we have for today, Abby, and hope you have a great weekend and enjoy the 4th of July.
Thank you. You as well. It'll be a nice little break for us, huh?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you for
Thanks.
having me.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
You too.